10.3, graphing from standard form. All right, so standard form, again, we've talked about this before, is right here, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are just numbers. Okay, so a, b, and c are numbers. It could be 1, 3, -7, it could be any number, okay? We'll always be talking about integers. Those are like whole numbers, like 1 or 7, no decimals, no fractions, okay? All right, and also the first thing it says is, what information do you need in order to graph a quadratic function? So in 10.2, we talked about how we need to know what the vertex is. So we need the vertex, and then we also need the growth pattern. And again, the growth pattern here is like 1, 3, 5. We always go over 1, and then we'll either go up or down, depending if A is positive or negative. If A is positive, the leading term is positive, then it will go up, open up. And if A is negative, it's going to open down. Okay? Some key features that we can find without much work. One is called the axis of symmetry. We know where to find it on a graph, but being able to find it from an equation is a little different. So this is just kind of like something you're going to need to memorize. Okay, the axis of symmetry is x equals, it's always x equals because it's a line, but to find it from the equation, it's always going to be -b all over 2a. And again, those b's come from, and the a comes from what's in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So whatever those numbers are, whatever b is and whatever a is, we'll just plug that into our equation, and that gives us our axis of symmetry. Okay? And then the y-intercept we can find really easy. It is 0, c. So that comes from the c of your equation. So we can find these two things by just looking at the coefficients or the constants. Okay? So, great, we found the axis of symmetry and the y-intercept, but how is that going to help us graph an equation in standard form? All right? Well, again, if we were to graph a parabola, something like this, and if we were able to find the axis of symmetry, the vertex is on that line. Okay? We just need to figure out what the axis of symmetry is. So we already know what that is. We have the equation for that. So if we can find the axis of symmetry, so that's like our first step, is to find the axis of symmetry. Okay, sometimes I will call that the AOS, just because I don't want to write that all the time. So just so you know, axis of symmetry, AOS, okay? And that ends up giving us an X. The next thing we need to find the Y for the vertex. So to find the Y for your vertex, all we need to do is plug the axis of symmetry into the equation. Into the equation. And that axis of symmetry, again, that's just your x. So that ends up giving us a y. And that x comma y, that gives us our vertex. So let's do a couple examples and see if this helps you understand a little better. Okay, so here we have an equation, and we need to find our vertex. Again, that's the first thing we always need to find, is the vertex. Because if we can find the vertex, then we can use our growth pattern and we can get a lot more points really easy. Okay, so to do that first step is we need to find the axis of symmetry. And that's x equals -b over 2a. Here a is 1. Again, if something's missing, like a coefficient, it's going to be a 1. Okay? And then here would be our b, is negative 6, and c is 13. All right, so now we can figure out what this is. That's negative b, so that's negative. It's already a negative from here. Negative 6 all over 2 times a, which is 1. And then you may need to use your calculator to simplify this, but that ends up giving us 6 over 2, or 3. So we know that our axis of symmetry is 3. We could even draw that dotted line that we do sometimes. So we know that our vertex is on that. We just don't know how high or how low it is. So now we need to do our second step, is we need to find the y that goes with that x. So if we have an x and we need to find a y, then all we need to do is plug it in for x. So y equals 3 squared minus 6 times 3 plus 13. And I wouldn't expect anyone to do this by hand. You're welcome to just use your calculator, and if you have questions on how to do that, just let me know. So again, when you plug it into your calculator, please include those parentheses. So parenthesis 3, close parenthesis, would square it, minus 6, and then we'll do parenthesis 3, close parenthesis, and then plus 13. Just how it looks. And you end up getting 4. Okay, so our last thing is just to write down what the vertex is. Vertex here is 3, 4. So 3, 4 is right here. And then we need to use our growth pattern. So A is positive, which means it's going to open up, and we need to do 1, 3, 5. So over 1, up 1, over 1, up 3, and we can't do 5 because that's outside of our graph. Please make sure you use arrows on the end telling us that it keeps going forever. And we're done. Okay, so just a few steps and we've got it. Here's another example. Pause and give this a try if you'd like, or try C and D after. Again, we need to find our axis of symmetry. That's x equals negative b over 2a, so we should maybe write down what a is. Here a is negative 1. Again, we can always put a 1 there. So negative 1, and then here b is negative 2. Again, the sign goes with it, so don't just accidentally do just 2. It needs to be negative 2. So that ends up giving us negative b. Well, b is negative, so that will end up giving us a positive 2. All over 2 times a, which is negative 1. Again, you could plug all that into your calculator if you wanted to, or you can simplify it by hand, and would end up getting negative 1. So we know our axis of symmetry is right here. The vertex is on it. We just need to figure out what it is. So the second step is to plug that into our equation. Take that negative 1, and we're going to plug it in to x. So we'll have negative, and again put parentheses, especially if it's a negative. Make sure you put in a parenthesis. And we'll square it, and then we'll do minus 2 times negative 1 plus 2. Again, I would maybe just use your calculator to figure it out. That's what I'm going to do right now. If you have questions again how to do that, please just let me know. And we end up getting 3. Okay, actually I learned a cool trick that I could do this. So here, could clear that all in, although my buttons are a little different. But again, if you're going to use a negative, you need to make sure you use the negative button instead of a subtraction. Otherwise, your calculator will give you an error. So we'll do negative, and then we'll do a parenthesis, negative 1, close the parenthesis, and we'll square it. We'll do minus 2 -1, put that in a parenthesis, then plus 2, and we end up getting 3. Okay. So now we have our vertex. Our vertex is -1, comma 3. Again, that's just your x, comma y that we just found out. So -1, 3, and then we'll need to use our growth pattern. A is a -1, so that means it's going to go down, over 1, down 1, over 1, down 3, and over 1, down 5. Symmetric over the axis of symmetry. Connect the dots. Use arrows. We're set to go. All right. Looks like we have some other examples on the second page, and there's a summary of what we covered. So you're welcome to do as many as you feel like you're comfortable. You're welcome to pause and give these two a try. I think these ones are a little different, so I'd love you to make sure you, especially D, make sure you can do D before you go, and then we'll do some other key feature stuff to make sure you're getting it. But again, here's kind of the summary in case you decide you want to be done. So first we need to find our x value for our vertex. Again, that's your axis of symmetry. That's the -b over 2a. Then we need to find the y value. So to do that, we just plug what we found for the axis of symmetry into our equation, and that gives us the y. And then we can write down our vertex, x comma y. And here is a worked out example if you have any questions. Okay? All right, so again, please make sure you do D before you're gone. Let's do this one together too. So actually, we'll do D first. So again, we need to find our axis of symmetry. Well, that's x equals -b over 2a. So again, what we did is we wrote down what a, b, and c are. So here a is 1, b is, and c. Well, we only have two terms. Which what? I don't know. So again, our standard form is, maybe we should write that down, ax squared plus bx plus c. So what is this? Well, 3 doesn't have an x with it, so it's got to be your constant. And b, again, we kind of talked about this before in our last unit when we were factoring. If the middle term is missing, it's got to be 0. Okay, so please notice that if the middle term, the term that just has an x, not the term with the x squared, not the term that has just the constant, but if the middle term is missing, we need to write down that b is 0. Okay, so now we can come up with our axis of symmetry. That's -0 over 2 times 1. Well, that's 0 over 2, and that's just 0. So our axis of symmetry is x equals 0. And then we need to find our y for our vertex. So we just plug that in, plug 0 in for x. So we'd have 0 squared plus 3. And that gives us 0 plus 3, or 3. So our vertex is right here at 0, comma 3. And now we can use our growth pattern. So a is positive 1, so we'll go over 1, up 3, and we'll do it on both sides. And we're done. Okay, so again, please make sure we understand that if the middle term is missing, b is 0. All right, here's another example where the constant's missing, but here we don't really need to worry about it too much. Here a is -1, b is 2, c here is 0. The constant is 0. But to find the axis of symmetry, we don't need to know what c is. So -b over 2a. So that gives us -2 over 2 times -1. That gives us -2 over -2, or +1. So our axis of symmetry is positive 1, x equals positive 1. And then our second step is to plug that in. So I plug that 1 in for x, negative, and then we'll put the 1 inside the parenthesis. So again, whenever you substitute something in, put it in a parenthesis. And then that would give us plus 2 times 1. Okay, I want to make sure you're good with this. So this is only squaring the 1. It's not squaring the negative. So that will end up giving us a negative 1. Okay. And then we'll do plus 2. And that gives us positive 1. So our vertex is 1, 1. And then we'll use our growth pattern. Go over 1, down 1, over 1, down 3, over 1, down 5. And we'll do it on both sides. One thing that's a really good idea is to check and make sure we have it right by checking the y-intercept. Again, we know that C is the y-intercept. That's where it crosses. And here it is. It's crossing at y equals 0. Okay? So you can always check that. Again, here this worked out too. We have 3. Here it crosses at 2, and that's what we have here is 2. Here it crosses at 13, which we can't see, but I imagine it would cross there. Okay? All right, so I think I will probably make this a second video if you want to do these practices. Otherwise, you're good to go. All right, see you guys.